Now, last year, Joe reported for us on the Scottish salmon farming industry, discovering high levels of fish mortality and food waste.
Well, now Joe is investigating how one of the causes of that waste may, in some cases, be getting out of hand.
Donny Whiteford is a fishing guide on the Isle of Lewis in the Outer Hebrides. Earlier in the summer, he made a distressing discovery at the mouth of the Blackwater River.
It was really by the middle of July I started noticing problems. Fish getting very agitated, getting very lethargic. Before long they were swimming up covered in sea lice, absolutely infested in sea lice, swimming up onto these shallow shelves at the side of the pool, beaching themselves. They just wanted to die. Some of them were already dead.
Sea lice feed on the skin of fish. Too many can prove fatal. In this case, hundreds of lice were counted on some of these salmon. One had over 700. This fish was filmed clearly suffering. In all, 81 mature wild salmon were confirmed dead, and it's thought many more died in the sea loch.
I've never, ever encountered anything like that before. I hope I never do again.
No one can say for certain exactly how these wild fish ended up with such high numbers of lice, but it is known that when sea lice get into salmon farms, their numbers can rapidly escalate to unnatural levels, which can infect wild fish nearby. Andrew Graham Stewart campaigns for more protection for wild fish.
It is very likely in the circumstances that there was a catastrophic event on the salmon farm, that perhaps they lost control of sea lice numbers, and the consequences are that sea lice soup was created in the area around the farms, i.e. millions and millions of parasitic sea lice larvae, and the wild fish coming back from the Atlantic ran into this and got infected.
When he heard the news, Corin Smith, a fishing guide and photographer, decided to film inside one of the cages at that nearest farm, known as Vacasay.
There were visibly fish up on the surface which were obviously on their last legs, but had a lot of damage to their heads. That damage is caused by the lice eating the soft flesh and the skin, and they move to the front of the fish and gradually eat it from the front to the back. So wherever you see that kind of white head, then it's lice damage. It's the lice eating the fish alive, essentially.
How significant was this sea lice infestation from what you could see?
I think it's about as intense as it can get without the entire cage dying, really. The amount of stock that was in a state where they should have been euthanized was shocking and upsetting. I've never seen anything like it in my life.
The Vacasay farm is run by the Scottish Salmon Company, which says it takes this very seriously. They stated, "We are committed to responsible farming practices and stringent health management of our stock." They also added that higher temperatures this summer had increased the number of sea lice. As we've previously reported on The One Show, last year over 25,000 tonnes of salmon died on Scottish farms, much of it transported long distances by truck to be incinerated. But some of the recent dead salmon from Loch Rogue didn't follow that route. After filming on the farm, Corin followed a lorry from the loch to a remote location in North Uist. He was surprised to find dead fish being disposed of at an open landfill site. His footage shows that many more farmed fish have died in this part of Scotland this summer.
I was amazed. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of salmon, dead salmon, being disposed of in the pit.
The fish were covered with seaweed and sand soon afterwards, and the owner told us netting was normally in place. However, he wouldn't say how many fish had been sent to the site or how long it had taken for this amount of dead salmon to accumulate. Burying fish is outlawed on environmental grounds, but a temporary exemption was made for this site 2 years ago because of the long journey times to mainland disposal sites.
It's a local solution for a local problem. So we take the dead fish in, the mortalities in, and we dispose of them in the sand pits. I'm not going to continue burial for much longer because I've got a new state-of-the-art unit coming in that will take all the oil into the fish, make a bio-oil, and then dry the rest of the fish down and turn it into a chip for biomass burners.
The Fish Health Inspectorate visited the infected farm last week and told me that lice numbers there had peaked at just over 13 times the accepted limit, but had since fallen. The body representing salmon producers says the bigger picture is much more positive.
The overall picture for the salmon farming industry is that lice levels are on the decline. One or two photographs, they're very sad to see the condition of one or two fish, but overall the bigger picture is that our fish in lice terms are as healthy as they have been in 5 years, and the underlying trend is even more improvement. We've got the best brains in Scotland on these issues, and it's in everybody's interest to make sure that we farm healthy and quality farmed salmon, and the industry's passionate about doing that.
Well, Joe is here now. Some pretty disturbing images there in that report, Joe. Is there an update then on the farm? I mean, what's the situation by now?
Yeah, well, first of all, I should say that the Scottish Salmon Company, that's the operator of the farm we featured in the film, have been in touch with an updated statement. They say that they're worried about some of that footage being out of context, but they don't really explain what they mean by that. But they say the Scottish SPCA, the animal welfare charity, and the Plant and Animal Health Agency have both been on the site last week to have a look, and they say that both found the required action was being put in place and was being taken. So they say those two authorities are pretty happy. Clearly, this has been a very busy farm in the last week, because I also spoke to the Fish Health Inspectorate. Now, they are really the authority that deal with sea lice numbers, amongst other things. They went back onto the site last week as well. They did a sea lice count. And the good news is that from a peak, a very big peak we mentioned in the film over 3 weeks ago, the lice numbers have fallen significantly. They're still higher than you'd like, going by the code of good practice, but they have fallen. So that is good news. The authorities do seem to be content that the measures are in place now to control sea lice numbers there. And I should also say that disposal point we saw, you know, I was very surprised when I saw those pictures. Many people will be, but just to reassure that they won't be buried, dead salmon won't be buried on that site for much longer. They're very close now to getting the equipment they need there to be able to turn the dead salmon into fuel instead of just burying them in the ground.
And also that was one farm that we featured there, the 208 that are active in the UK. So how widespread is this problem?
It's certainly not a one-off, and the inspectors confirmed to me they've seen worse, but equally many farms do not have those problems. So a good measure really is what's called the reporting threshold. Now, when a farm's sea lice numbers begin to creep up, they get to a point where they're significant enough they have to tell the authorities. So that is the reporting threshold. Last year in 2017, 82 farms reached that reporting threshold. As you said, there's just over 200 active farms now. So 82 reached that reporting threshold last year. This year it's lower. So far, it's 33. But here we are, beginning of September. And actually, so there's still over 3 months to go. And also, I would say, we all know it's been a great summer. That means the sea temperature is warm. In warm water, sea lice multiply rapidly. So actually, we could still be seeing some problems.
And just to be clear then, can sea lice affect the quality of the salmon that we're eating?
Well, look, first of all, the company we filmed say that those fish we saw really badly damaged with the white heads, they will be disposed of. They won't go forward for food processing. But Food Standards Scotland say not to worry, that sea lice on salmon is not a food safety concern. People do not need to change the way that they buy and eat their salmon from Scotland. But equally, just overall, there's a lot of concern about this industry at the moment. Earlier this year, we had a Scottish Parliamentary Environment report. A committee brought out a report saying that they can't go on as they are. Something's got to change if they're going to keep expanding. They said the status quo is not an option. There is another inquiry about to report. They're finalising their draft report at the moment. We expect it later this month. And it'll be very interesting to see what they make of it, because there is now a real call for change, particularly on the environmental.
And as they're saying, they've got the best bods, you know, trying to sort this out.
I certainly hope so. Big questions are being asked, and that will continue.
Lovely. Thank you, Joe.